thanks very much, Jimmy. Hello to everyone watching virtually and to my colleagues in London, Slovenia, and Zug. It's a pleasure speaking here today at CoinGeek Live. I'd like to extend a big thank you to the CoinGeek team for putting together such a great event in this challenging global environment. Job well done. Today, the focus of my brief talk is simple. It's about data, extreme scale data. At nChain, we believe that Bitcoin is the ideal base layer technology for dealing with real world data, due to some unique features of this massively scalable, append-only single source of truth. When we look at opportunities to work with data to help businesses and individuals better control and monetize their data, we see an explosion in the variety and size of data sets in the future. The amount of digital data we produce globally is a staggering number. Some estimates say it's as much as 30 terabytes per second. That number is almost unfathomable. But data is merely the raw material. Today, only a small fraction of that data is able to be harnessed and used. It must be organized and analyzed to unlock its full value. At nChain, that's what we do. We help enterprise organizations harness their data and make it transactable. The focus is often on digital data, but now imagine the data produced in the physical world: transit data, agricultural data, personal data. Harnessing data at that scale creates all kinds of new opportunities, uncovering insights and opportunities at the scale of cities, nations, and the entire planet. To date, the biggest challenge has been the lack of connected infrastructure to capture, index, and query these diverse data sources. But that's changing, and it's a change we're going to be a big part of. That's why we're excited to announce today our investment in a company that's critical to making it happen. As Paul mentioned a few moments ago, this morning, nChain announced that we've co-led a $5.5 million Series A financing round in a Cambridge, UK-based company called Geospock. We're doing that to fuel the on-chaining of more physical, real-world data. Investing behind nChain in this deal are some well-established technology investors, including Cambridge Innovation Capital, Global Brain from Tokyo, and the venture arm of NTT Docomo, one of the largest mobile carriers in Japan. Geospock's already positioned as one of the cutting-edge technology providers in some of the highest profile smart city initiatives globally. These smart city programs are the largest IoT projects in the world. By working together with Geospock, nChain is now positioned to compete for some of these exciting projects. I'm extremely excited about this opportunity. So now I'd like to invite Geospock's CEO, Richard Baker, from our London studio to introduce you to Geospock and speak about the future we're envisioning together. Thank you, and let's welcome Richard Baker.
Hello, Dave. Thank you very much for that really, really warm introduction, and I'm delighted to be with you today. Jimmy, hello. I hope you're well. You've done an amazing job over the last 3 days. I think you are the James Corden or the Oprah Winfrey of the Bitcoin world. Truly astounding to coordinate this event. Firstly, I have to say thank you to nChain for leading the investment round over the last few months. We are delighted to have the backing of nChain. They are a truly strategic partner for us. They share a very common vision of where data will play in the modern economy. And we're aligned very much so in terms of the protocols, the tools, and the value chains that really need to be built to ensure that we are bringing the best from this physical world into the modern economy. So I'm going to talk not about Bitcoin SV for the first part of what I take you through. In fact, I'm going to dare to take us into the world of geography. And so for those of you that enjoyed your high school geography lessons, I didn't put my geography blazer patches on today, but we're going to go back in time and talk about the modern digital economy of geospatial engineering. At the heart of the modern world is digitization, and every part of our economy is digitizing at a rapid rate. This is generating a data-first strategy around the world, and ultimately it's giving rise to a new set of challenges. And we've heard a lot about these challenges throughout this conference this week, and that is that data is coming in new forms. In our world, we refer to this data as the machine-to-machine data. but ultimately how you capture it, transform it, and translate it for decision-making and understanding is at the heart of how we've built our business at Geospock. I'm going to rest on some work that got published in the UK by the UK government just this year. In June of 2020, the Geospatial Commission published a national strategy framework to look at unlocking the power of location data. Around the world, we've actually seen very similar strategies from many nation states. And this is about how they are implementing and modernizing infrastructure through digitization. To set this in context, certainly in terms of the data that Geospock works with on a frequent basis, we're looking really here at location data or geospatial data. And location data, at its heart, is really a record of what, where, and indeed when we do something. And at the heart of the way we think about processing this data at Geospock, these identifiers form what we refer to as geotemporal data. Now, location data is a new asset class, and it's great at a conference like this that we're beginning to see the digital economy and the financial markets beginning to merge. And what we're going to see in the next few years is a significant opportunity for how this new asset class is harnessed. In the UK, the Geospatial Commission have estimated that something in the order of £11 billion per year will be generated as GDP on the back of new location data. Now, this location data is synonymous with a digital society. It is about the new services and applications that we're going to see entering our lives. These new services and applications are going to be underpinned by what is happening at an event in time and space. And space, I mean by a location. Location data will become the unifying connection between things, systems, people, and our habitat, our environment. You can see here that we're talking about a number of industries that are already beginning to take advantage of location data and indeed will be transformed significantly through the digitization of the economy. And so putting this in context, if we look at the current crisis around the world with COVID, COVID has forced us all to be at home. At the heart of how we potentially bring back our economies is being able to see, track, and trace, ultimately give us the tools to release the economy on a case-by-case basis. So small towns, small cities, going into small shutdowns, but not on a national basis. Location data is at the heart of being able to make those decisions in near real time. We spend a lot of time looking at cities that are trying to get on top of carbon footprints. And of course, we're seeing interdependencies between systems. So as we see central authorities try and bring down carbon footprint, at the heart of that decision is ultimately transport systems and the movement of people, goods, and services around a city. And if you can't bring this data together and understand these interdependencies, it's very difficult to make decisions that are for the best of all parties, and particularly citizens and our ecologies. Now, the Geospatial Commission have highlighted 6 significant trends that are underpinned by unlocking location data. Again, we've heard a lot about data types throughout the last 3 days, but trend 1 being the rise of real-time data. Of course, as we're beginning to digitize our towns, our cities, our transport networks, we're seeing sensors be at the heart of that transformation. So trend 2 being the deployment of sensors at scale. And these sensors are ranging from simple actuators through to very sophisticated climate monitoring sensors. And of course, in the middle of that is our smartphones and all of the sensor arrays that are on a connected vehicle. If you're driving around in a modern vehicle, that vehicle has got thousands of sensors and telematics streaming from the car over a mobile network. Trend 3, the rise of artificial intelligence. Ultimately, we rely on machine learning and AI to help us make decisions and translate this vast quantity of data. Humans will not be able to interpret all of these events and all of these data sets that ultimately need to be fused together to give us a holistic picture. we will rely on digital twins or digital shadows, and we'll rely on artificial intelligence to help us understand what these models are telling us. Very much at the heart of this Bitcoin SV conference has been the rise of cloud computing and edge computing, and the role of Bitcoin SV, to me, is pretty clear in terms of a immutable protocol, transaction, infrastructure that will be synonymous with how digitization in society will take place. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But of course, what's really driving that edge compute model is a change in communications networks. Around the world, we hear about 5G and advanced connectivity now being deployed by most infrastructure companies, mobile operators. 5G is truly a massive generator of new data. This infrastructure will see small base stations deployed every 200 meters or so in towns and cities. And uniquely, these base stations will be able to deal with up to 1 million concurrent connected devices, offering very high frequency of data throughput and data transfer. And so when we think about our cities in the future of connected vehicles, buses running around, and us with our mobile phones, all of this connectivity will jump on this new infrastructure. Trend 6 is very significant, data visualization. At the end of the day, humans will need to be able to translate this machine-to-machine physical infrastructure data and make decisions. And whether it's visualizing in business intelligence tools or in 3D maps, or indeed VR, we will need to rely on visualization to help us understand and decipher what's around us. Now, bringing these things together, these are indeed extreme-scale data environments. And it is the new normal. David has just mentioned the rate of transmission and the rise of data. Throughout the conference, we've talked a lot about the transmission rates that indeed Bitcoin SV needs to cater for. And there's very good reason that this journey is one that we've joined forces with nChain on. IoT devices is the new physical device that is ultimately extending the edge of the internet. In the next 30 years, every physical device on the planet will have an IP address and will be part of the internet fabric. These devices range from, as I've mentioned already, smart street lighting, connected vehicles, through to smart meters and, of course, our smart fridge. And this is the new machine-to-machine data-producing economy. Gartner, Juniper forecasts something in the order of 83 billion connected IoT points, or physical internet points, by 2024. And as a data-producing environment, this data is going across the new high-capacity mobile networks. It's destined for cloud computing environments. And here we see a forecast again from Gartner talking about 54 exabytes of data in cloud computing environments by 2022 coming from this pervasive IoT infrastructure. Now, there are challenges in how we deal with this data today. Existing database solutions struggle to cope. Really, we've got databases that were designed in the 1970s for relational data sets that come from humans. You and I generating Word documents or text language on web pages. These databases were not designed to harness this information that is coming from connected devices. The challenges that that poses to enterprises today is that really they make decisions early in the value chain of harnessing data that says, well, we can't ingest all of the data, therefore we throw some away or we don't store it. So 90% of the value from these sensors is being lost before it's even entered the organization. Again, another pervasive commentary this week has been the challenge of silos. Data silos exist in all markets, all enterprises today. I think it was ERH Data that talked about the challenge of breaking down silos earlier this week in the pharmaceutical and medical industry. But we see it in the rise of smart cities and in transport and logistics networks, and indeed in mobile operators. Infrastructure has been built in silos. We see streetlight networks or Bluetooth networks, Wi-Fi networks, ultimately being built as discrete infrastructure, and each of those networks has its own database. And those databases don't share information and don't talk together. So the challenge here is about how do we bring aggregation and ultimately fuse this environment. And a theme I regularly talk about with our clients is the fact that, of course, when you're introducing new technology to industry, you have to figure out how to take the existing employees of those enterprises on the journey into the new markets. Rip and replace is a very hard thing to do. And so ultimately, you have to have mechanisms to be able to translate that data into the new protocols, into the new technologies, and take those employees on an upskill or a change journey. David has kindly introduced us, and we're delighted to be joining the Bitcoin SV family, and certainly delighted to be here at the CoinGeek conference. We're headquartered here in the UK. We're founded in Cambridge. Our founder is a wonderful friend of mine, Dr. Steve Marsh, and he studied computer engineering at Cambridge University. And his challenge back in 2011, 2012 was building a supercomputer to emulate 1 second of the human brain. And this indeed was a challenge that he succeeded in. And it was the principles of engineering for that particular problem set that inspired the generation of our database infrastructure. I won't throw buzzwords around today too much, but fundamentally, our team of engineers and data scientists ultimately have built out what we refer to as Geospock DB, an analytics database. Now, we've seen economies that are approaching digitization most prevalent in Asia. We opened offices in Singapore and Tokyo, Japan in 2019, and that is because Asia's cities are digitizing their economies much quicker than the West. We are seeing modern infrastructure, and this modern infrastructure is part of 10, 15, 20-year reinvention programs. This is about upskilling society. It's about giving citizens new roles. And this is, I think, exciting. Smart cities and smart nations at the heart of this transformation. And so we're delighted to be working with governments and enterprises in these markets, but it is a long journey. Now, the database analytics market is competitive and, frankly, confusing. If I may, I think we all understand some of the traditional names that have been in this industry for a very long time. But the newcomers who have really been on the planet for a very short space of time, like Google, Amazon, Microsoft Azure, some of the newer engines like Snowflake, ultimately have given the promise of cloud computing at scale. They deal with performance characteristics and low-cost computed storage environments. We deal in that market, and we're a disruptor for that market. But we also blend another specialism, and that specialism is around spatial engineering. And at the heart of really translating the value from this IoT economy is being able to bring time series data and spatial data together and fuse it to unlock the value in these vast data sets. So we're a specialist operator in dealing with geotemporal analytics. And so we disrupt both the high-performance cloud computing market, but also the specialist geospatial market. And we were delighted to work earlier this year with a number of our clients on getting on top of some very significant data sets. Our market talks about billion-row queries and harnessing geospatial data, bringing it into a database, and ultimately interrogating it. Really, the industry has worked with billion-row challenges. We solved trillion-row challenges earlier this year, unlocking hundreds of terabytes of data and ultimately ensuring that that can be accessed in seconds. Now, we've talked in this conference a lot about the machine-to-machine economy and the different evolutions that we will appear. I put this together to really try and say that systems need to be agnostic to the underlying industries. We're seeing a commonality in the digitization of infrastructure. And we've got a lot of jargon words here around the communication networks and the infrastructure that is going in as part of this revolution. But really, whether we're dealing with service providers and the rise of 5G or LTE networks, or we're dealing with transport and logistics that are digitizing everything from shipping to last mile delivery, through to, as Craig mentioned yesterday, the oil and gas industry digitizing pipelines. Really, we're talking about harnessing the metadata that is coming from a device of interest, and this is really key. There is event information produced from an IoT sensor. This event information today gives off details of time, of activities or events that are happening around that sensor or to that sensor. And increasingly, what we're going to see is transaction records. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we've joined the Ford car sharing club. And this club ultimately in the next few years, or any auto manufacturer, will ultimately have Richard with a digital wallet coming up to a vehicle, and I want to ultimately authenticate myself and get in this vehicle and drive off. And in fact, I won't be driving off, the car will be driving me. But ultimately, this vehicle is now running around a connected city. And every time it passes a smart street light, we're ultimately harvesting geospatial, geotemporal data. But ultimately, the decisions that need to be made by that auto company, but also by the city, to authenticate me, to permission me to be in that vehicle, and ultimately to charge me for the time I've been in that vehicle. All of this information is transaction records coming from this pervasive IoT infrastructure. Now, this rise in machine-to-machine data and the deployment of IoT, at its heart, is about mini robots being in society. And the role of a robot is automation. Sensors ultimately equate to automation of event and transaction records from the physical world so that we can build a digital economy and ultimately monetize and build new experiences, new applications. We also exist in a very typical value chain. Again, we've seen from Jerry when he was talking from TAL this week about the transformation of data through ETL processes. On the left here, we're talking about the sense environment. The sense environment being these very pervasive IoT sensors in all parts of the economy. And that information is being translated today into ETL processes and being put in schemas, certainly by Geospock, that allows us to fuse and index all of this data together so that upstream it can be presented in formats such as SQL that allows it to be connected to data science tools or business intelligence tools or indeed programmatic environments for machine learning and AI. Now, the heart of any value chain is recognizing that entering an industry is always about the competition on the existing desktop. And desktops today are populated with business intelligence tools like Tableau or QuickSight. Data science teams use Juniper notebooks. And ultimately, we're seeing the rise of new open source visualization tools like the Uber tool here, Kepler. Ultimately, whether it's Bitcoin SV entering into being on the desktop of data analytics engineers or data scientists or Geospock, you must ensure that you can present industry standard tools. And so API frameworks and SQL interfaces become really critical in being able to unlock and bring with you the existing enterprise into the new world. I wanted to share with you a project we worked on late last year, early this year. This is digitization in action in Singapore. And so here we've got the road gantry network that is built in Singapore. This is called the electronic road pricing infrastructure. And here we've got 4 million vehicles running around the city in a day. And of course, every time a vehicle passes underneath the road gantry system, it is producing an event. And in a modern economy, what we're really trying to see here is, okay, how many people were in the car? Is it a single driver? Is it a multi-occupancy vehicle? What was the origin and end point of the journey? And what type of vehicle was being used? And of course, with this information, you can start to gear change. And change is about, well, if that's an electric vehicle and there's multiple people, then we'll charge less. But if that's a combustion engine vehicle and only one driver, then the road pricing will be higher. And ultimately, we're seeing economies begin to act on this data coming from these infrastructure systems to really start to plan the changes that will happen in their cities. Now, this is our example of 1.3 trillion rows queried and managed in minutes and seconds. And whilst I've given one example here around road charging pricing, of course, this goes well beyond that. This is about multimodal transport planning in cities. This is about lowering CO2 emissions. It's about smart infrastructure. Now, some of the industries and customers that we find leading the way in this digitization of the physical world are mobile operators, are the smart cities around the world, are ultimately transport and logistics firms. And if there's one phenomenon that has happened this year, above all, because of COVID is, of course, last mile delivery. Whether it's a Deliveroo or it's a DPT delivery company, we are seeing a huge rise in the logistics industry and their need to use data to help them to route efficiently, to plan and optimize their networks. At the heart of this, all technology is about what you enable your customers to do. And we're delighted that we're at the heart of helping service providers begin to think about the value add that they bring to their customers, building out new services. Or it's about optimizing urban environments, or moving things efficiently, or ultimately discovering new audiences and new ways of building ecosystems. And for me, and in our collaboration with nChain, the opportunity here to turn real life events and transactions into a new economic opportunity is truly exciting. And I think at the heart of what we think about and what powers our vision is, in the same way that Google indexed the internet and made it searchable, our role and our mission is to index the physical world and make it searchable. So the opportunity for Bitcoin SV in this context to be the protocol, the infrastructure for the physical world, particularly for transactions, is immense. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Richard. That was a really fascinating presentation. I have an audience question, if you have a moment to answer it, which is, will Geospock work together with self-driving car manufacturers?
That's a great question, Jimmy. Yes is the answer. We have already a couple of projects with some major OEMs, and the role in there, of course, is for those OEMs to think about how they take the telematics data off the vehicle and ultimately translate it into new services. So yes, that's an exciting part of this whole digital economy, and whether that's predictive maintenance programs or better insurance policies, or indeed how you share that car network in a connected city in the future, so that my example of me being able to go up to the car with my digital wallet and just have a journey, absolutely the OEMs are really thinking about how those services will work in the future.
Let's go to Dave. Dave, what will be the next steps in collaboration between nChain and Geospock to fulfill this vision using Bitcoin SV?
Yeah, great question, Jimmy. We've got a lot of ideas at high level that we've been scoping out. So the next phase, now that we've closed the negotiation of this financing, is to actually get our technical teams together, get to know each other, and narrow down this massive world of opportunities into a few very tangible projects to work on together. But very clear that smart cities will be something we plan on focusing on together.
And final question to Richard. What are the areas of use cases that you're most excited about to implement first?
Yeah, I think we've certainly observed, Jimmy, that a lot of smart cities have got proof of concepts and pilot projects for blockchain now, or digital ledgers. I think there is a big recognition that DLT has a very significant role to play for harnessing these transaction records that are coming from digital infrastructure. It's, I think, to the heart of a lot of the topics that were discussed over the last few days, but it's about open sharing of information. It's about releasing effectively siloed data to try and create innovation. I think if we look at a lot of smart cities today, whether I want to create innovation around where are disabled parking spaces in a city, well, if you put an IoT sensor in that disabled bay, and you ultimately put that information on Bitcoin SV, you'll create an environment where people can innovate in writing great apps to help communities of people get access to resources. And I think that's where we're going to see some of the early wins for us.
And Richard, last question before we close off. For the companies out there watching this and the entrepreneurs and developers, what would be the types of companies you're most interested in partnering with and having reach out to you?
Yeah, great question. I think as I talked about that value chain, this new ecosystem, we're interested in infrastructure ETL partners, so people that can ultimately harness what's coming from the physical economy. we're looking to partner with more ETL companies. I think equally on the visualization side, I think if we're ultimately beginning to see next generation AR and VR visualizations, I'm interested to see that. And I think in our collaboration with nChain, ultimately it's beginning to look at the financial side of the transaction economy. So I think businesses that are in the tokenization part of the market, we're interested to be working with those kind of ecosystem players as well.